do things. I'd just like to talk a little bit about what the technical aspects of this might look like. And what we see here is a classic service-orientated platform. And what that does is it allows the apps, which are the beautifully coloured little square things at the top, to communicate with a range of services that are needed to support things like interoperability, orchestration, information governance and so on at the bottom, and each other, and perhaps other such ecosystems. You could have an ecosystem in a hospital, in a trust, in a care community, in a nation, whatever. It can be at many levels. There's a diversity of things. So you may have a choice of apps that can do e-prescribing. You may have a choice of places where you may store your patient record. You'll have things like enterprise-wide scheduling, which in the NHS context would be choose and book or e-booking. You'll have places where you can access the latest NICE guidelines in a computable format, or the latest, or check your drug interactions. And these need all to talk together. Now the good news is a lot of this is happening already. A lot of this stuff exists. Spine 2 provides much of that ESB layer. Smart Platform, which comes from Harvard, provides a common interface for apps that exist. Interoperability Toolkit, standards like OpenEHR and FHIR, they're all coming together, and progress in this area is actually faster than you might imagine, and faster than I knew it was this time yesterday. I've learned something in the last 24 hours. So that's what we're trying to do technically, build that ecosystem, and there are a number of challenges. If you're an app developer, the first thing to do is to identify a need and to ask if anybody else is addressing it. The most common experience I have running Handi is people phoning up young, clever, arrogant, with their brilliant idea. It's not bothered to check if anybody else has had that brilliant idea because nobody else is as brilliant as them. And within the first 15 seconds of the telephone conversation, using a search engine near me, I found 9 other examples of the app that they have an app doing the same thing that they haven't thought about. Now the response to that can be one of 3 things. It can be, let's go and collaborate with some of those people. Let's go and compete with those people because I actually have got a better, different angle on it, and it's always good to have some diversity. Or it might be, actually, there's enough people out there all doing it pretty well, I should go and have another idea. So do that early and fail fast. Look, what's the need and who else is addressing it, and how do I respond to that when I find out there are more people than I thought there would be? In our connected world, the chances of you being the first person to have that idea are vanishingly small. Generally speaking, if you've got a good idea and nobody else has had it, it's a stupid idea. Think about design. How do you make your app? Design is about form, fit for function. It's about desirability. Why is the iPhone terribly successful? Because you desire it. Because it's beautifully designed from a user interface, user experience, graphics, information design perspective. The fact that it's based on clinically unsound evidence doesn't matter. And indeed, there's good evidence coming from Professor Jeremy Wyatt at Leeds University that there's more sound the evidence base on which your app is built, the less downloads you get. And his thesis for that is because if you've got snake oil, you put a lot of effort into designing a beautiful bottle and marketing it well. And if you have the elixir of life, you don't bother with either of those things. So do think about design at every level. I want to look at your source code and feel that it looks like a piece of finely wrought poetry. I want to look at your user interface and feel that it's a piece of fine art. I want to feel actually it's a good piece of design, which is not the same thing. And within that context, agile, user-centered design. Working with frontline staff and developers and designers working together across the product life cycle with what you call patients, but within the context of most healthcare IT systems I call victims. These are the people who get poor service because the IT that clinicians and other healthcare professionals have to support them gets in the way of them doing it properly. And when I look at some systems in use, with real patients, with real data, I can only imagine that either the designer is an evil swine or he's never seen that system used in a real setting. And because I know that developers and designers are lovely people, I know that it's the latter that's true. They've never seen what happens to their system when rather than 10 test patients, all of whom have conveniently different names on it, when you have 40,000 patients, 600 of whom are called John Smiths, it doesn't work quite as well. So do sit down with the intended user, and if you're talking about something that's intended to be used at the interface between the healthcare professional and the service user or patient, with them as well, and see what happens. Business models, how do I fund my Mac to make it sustainable? There are commercial models, there are social entrepreneurial models, but it's not free, you need money to make it happen. What licensing options have I got? How can I make money out of open source? Should I go down a proprietary model? How do I protect my intellectual property rights? How do I make my intellectual property rights freely available so that others can use them if I wish? How do I protect them if I want to? How do I distribute my app? How do I get it to market? Maybe Scott will tell us a bit more about one way of doing that at the end of the afternoon. How do I get my apps to work together? How do I make them interoperable? How do I get them orchestrated? How do I make my thing platform and form factor agile? Actually, there's a lot of technology out there that does this stuff if you know it exists. And how do I create a consistent UI? Again, there was a lot of good work done by the NHS on the Common User Interface design a few years back, which is still relevant in this area. Quality assurance. What regulatory requirements do I have to comply with in order not to get thrown into jail? I'm sure the speaker from MHRA may touch on Medical Devices Directive. How do I comply with ISB 0129? All of these sorts of things. And if I have invested a lot of time and effort in ensuring that my app is technically sound and is built on good clinical evidence, how do I prove that and demonstrate to my customer that they should go to my app, maybe paying more for it than that rather beautiful snake oil app that actually is technically flaky and based on poor evidence? So two sides of quality assurance. From the user's perspective, how do I find something that's safe and appropriate? From the vendor's perspective, how do I avoid ending up in court? And also, how do I differentiate myself from those people who, and there are many out there, do not invest in ensuring that their apps are of appropriate quality? So, how can Handi help with that? Well, I say we're a not-for-profit community enterprise company. We've got through our first 2 years with about 10,000 quid and mainly voluntary effort. We've got a membership of 1,500, we've got 6 regional groups, we've run a number of events. We have an embarrassingly poor website, but that's due to a lack of resource. We're about facilitating networking, learning, cooperation and competition. I do think cooperation and competition can go together at a grassroots level between all elements of our community. Developers, health and care professionals, patients and public, academics, the investor community, the charitable trusts, all of the people who can contribute to making this happen. And we also lobby. So bang our heads on the doors of NHS England and Cabinet Office and Department of Business, Industry and Skills, saying these are the things that you've got to do to help us solve these problems. And to be fair to the people at the very top, we're pushing against an open door. They're up for this. The real risk is that they're a little bit too at the top of that hype cycle I showed you earlier, and the biggest problem we have is explaining, yes, they're right to be enthusiastic, but no, it's not quite as easy as you think, and no, if we get 9 women together in a room, we can't have a baby in a month. So it's those two levels, at the grassroots and at the top of the organisation. Trying to join the existing industry, which is where my background sits, existing health IT industry, with this new group of young, innovative startups and micro-enterprises, who certainly 2 years ago were remarkably separate and ignorant of the existence of each other. That is getting much better as they've discovered each other and understood they need each other, and I hope Handi's played a significant part in that. Handi is agnostic about things. We seek to be agnostic about anything that we can think of. Platforms. We're not here to promote Android over iOS, over BlackBerry, over Microsoft. We're agnostic about business models. you need a business model, but you can be a social entrepreneur wanting to create the wiki of healthcare, the Wikipedia of healthcare, or you can be a commercial entrepreneur wanting to create the Facebook of healthcare, or somewhere in between. We don't mind. We'll try and support your ambitions, whatever they are. We're not here to push a particular standard, HL7 over OpenEHR, over SNOMED, over FHIR, over whatever else you think of. We're not here to produce a unifying standard, because we know every time you produce a unifying, there are 14 standards, we must have a new standard to unify them, and you have 15 standards. We're not here to do that. We're not here to put particular tools or approaches above others. We're here to show the community what the possibilities are. This is the benefit of using Apple and the problems. This is the benefit of using Android. This is where you might use SNOMED. This is where you might use OpenAir. This is where you might prefer to use JSON over, I don't know, you choose, and let the community as individuals and organisations decide what they want to do. So, how can you help? How can you help? We do need help. We are a not-for-profit community enterprise. Do come along and join us. Join a local cluster. There's a sort of London cluster is the nearest one to here. Follow us on that hashtag. Watch that hashtag. Come and talk to me afterwards. I'm here all day. And according to my timer here, I've got 11 minutes and 51 seconds left for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A very elaborate, useful presentation. We don't have much time. I think we can only take up 1 or 2 questions. Is that right? Yeah, so limited. But maybe I can fire if nobody else is raised there.
And I'm around over lunch and for the afternoon.
But the important question is, how much is the clinician or the clinical involvement in developing a medical apps? Because we know that market is important. We know that management is important, support is important. But what about the medical ethics of developing apps? Because say, for instance, if I'm trying to develop, as you say, somebody called you in and said, look, he wants to develop this thing. So would it be right to protect themselves as clinicians to have some peer review of the things that they're trying to develop? Like they can have 4 other colleagues who would look into that and write something about their apps. So this might be a more protection in a situation you said, that somebody's developed something and landed up into difficulty going into a court. So maybe that's something to think about. I'm sure there are other speakers who would like to comment on that at some point.
Yeah, I mean,
I think if a clinician wants to develop a medical apps, then I'm sure we could put this in place, that they should have some peer review of their work.
Yeah.
And if 4 or 5 clinicians agree that it's a useful apps to develop, then they could move forward. So that could be one other step to help.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And if we look at something, there are a number of emerging initiatives to create things called curated app stores. And peer review is an intimate, the process of developing software shouldn't be any different from any other medical technology. It should be open, transparent, subject to peer review. So yes, absolutely, and that's part of the process. Much of what gets out there, of course, gets out there without peer review. And certainly end-user review is not always a good guide to what is sound from a clinical and technical perspective.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the privacy and security aspects of some of the applications?
Privacy and security is important. I don't think it's fundamentally different in relation to apps than it is in terms of any other digital technologies that we have in existing systems. I think sometimes information governance has become an industry and it's held up as a barrier to progress. If you don't want to do something, health and safety, information governance, what I call the tyranny of evidence, there is no evidence for innovation. You should evaluate, you should seek to build evidence, but it won't be there, and the more innovative you are, the less evidence there will be. So it's one of those things that you have to take very seriously. But the technology exists to address the issues. The obvious things that are a little bit different about things like this, is they're easily nickable.
Mm-hmm.
There's ways of solving that, not persisting data on the local device, ensuring that if it's held in an encrypted way, when the device is intended only to be used on the hospital premises, make sure, like the supermarket trolley, it stops working as you wander outside the bounds. Giving the patient a greater role around the sort of information governance, consent management piece. I mean, in that diagram, one of the many boxes there was that sort of federated consent management service. So, because many information governance problems go away if you let the patient decide in an informed and opt-in manner. And at the moment, that's impractical for many purposes, so you have to fall back on less appropriate things. So information governance and security are different. There are a few areas where these things are a bit more risky, mainly because of their easy nickability and losability. But I think there are technical solutions to those problems, and they're not fundamentally different from those that exist with existing IT systems.
So there's no other question. Well, one thing which is important, I just picked up on when you were saying, if nobody else has developed it, then this is the worst app you could develop.
Or you might be the person who's come up with the idea first.
Exactly. I mean, you might be developing something and nobody
in this
else
connected world, the chances of that are becoming vanishingly small. In the old days, if somebody hadn't done it in Maidstone, then as far as you were concerned, you were the only one. Now, there will, obviously, self-evidently, somebody has to be the first with an idea. But if you have an idea and nobody else has had it after a few weeks or, months, then probably you should start thinking, is my idea, it's either a poor idea or it's not a viable idea.
Or it's one of the best ideas.
It might be, but if it is, it's very unusual in a very large network of individuals, many of whom will be faced with the same environment. So they'll be aware of the same problems and the same technological solutions, and they will come up with similar ideas. The challenge for the innovator is to know when to move. If you move too early, you spend a lot of time establishing the principles. It is a good idea to have an app, or it is, a good idea to do e-prescribing. And you burn a lot of time and money persuading the marketplace that the concept is a valuable one. And your implementation is probably not, because it's the first one, it's not going to be the best. Somebody else coming along later, all of that groundwork's been done for them at your expense. If they're clever, they learn from your mistakes and they produce an app which does what yours does, but better, faster, cheaper, quicker, and they sweep the market. However, if you leave it too long to enter the marketplace, you can lose that opportunity to establish yourself as the name in that space. So timing in terms of when you take your innovation to market is critical.
The reason I was saying that, the reason I was saying that is when we develop our competition here in the Trust is quite, 2 sites, hospitals, and quite a few employees in there. We got a lot of interest generated. There were 40 ideas that were sent to us, and we looked through them, but we could find at least 20 ideas which were never there before, and they were very good to develop. So what the point I was making is that sometimes there are different angles of human thinking that comes through when you have more ideas and you see through them. But we had a way of checking that they were not developed before. We had a clinical review about these as well. So there were angles, and a lot of time, as you say, new ideas come in and they take over the market.
There will, there's nearly always somebody else active in the space that you're in, but you may have a different spin or a better idea on it. And it's about that balance, as I said, there is room for many, but not too many. And sometimes it's better to cooperate than it is to try and compete. And it's getting those decisions. So those two decisions, the balance between competition and cooperation and the timing of launching your innovation are both critical in determining success.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your kind help. So, the questions we are getting is just setting up right for our next speaker, which is Rob Higgins from MHRA. And the real question we have is, what is it? Is it a medical device, or is it a software